Cheers. I'm Mary MacArthur, and welcome to my channel. I'm going to make my first video here a response to a stream I heard the other day from the Academic Agent, Mr. D, and I believe the young woman was going by Cows, on the subject of the trads on Twitter, apparently. Thank God I never got sucked into Twitter, but clearly, if I'm making my first foray into content creation, sticking my finger into a potential hornet's nest of far more established and far more sophisticated streamers' business in critique. Haven't dodged the whole bullet of modernity there, but I guess I took it personally, so I'm going to try to at least heavily rationalize my personal offense that I took when he accused us trads of basically being 90s feminists. So, the through line here, I'm kind of going off the cuff here, I just took some notes while I was listening. The through line of my argument here is going to be that the accusations that were largely laid at some of the lowest hanging fruit, it seemed, in this Twitter exchange, by my estimation, by AA and Mr. D specifically, were... I think I have a direct quote written here that the male as a co-domestic is so revolting, is coming from a perspective of this very typical of like the Nietzschean, like it's hard not to see it as this like homoeroticization of like the Iliad and the Odyssey and of pagan antiquity, and a rejection of the Christian patrimony of the West and of Europe and the various nations in it. And it's very odd to hear from, especially AA. I'm not sure that Mr. D's ever said that he's been involved in like these efforts to bring the online right into meat space. I know there was some kind of event. I'm too busy. I'm a husband, father of a toddler, and I'm building a career, and I didn't get around to the convention, but I knew something happened, and it sounded like he made a speech or something. It seems strange that that he would be taking issue with the kind of if you're going to listen to my channel, if this is even going to become a channel, you better get used to long pauses and long-windedness and sentences that never end. Where was I? Yeah, basically, I'll take it from AA's perspective as best as I can articulate it. He's been obsessed with these Machiavellian notions of the exercise of power for some time. Anyone who pays attention to his content can see this. It's interesting stuff. I think it maps pretty accurately onto the mechanics of power, but he has also revealed himself of late to kind of, I worry for him that he's kind of stared long into the abyss, because it seems like he thinks that not necessarily any motivating, I don't want to say ideology, but any motivating principles, or certainly any sense of idealism or religious faith or anything like that, anything that would motivate any exercise of power is secondary, that power itself is primary. That's so foreign to me. I've I don't know. I think ideas come first. The exercise of power is it can be a drug, um, and one that I have at times indulged in, but it's a rare personality that can actually live by that. And the facts of AA's kind of chiming in with his like personal anecdotes about his daughter and exchanges with his wife at home really violate the notion that this is actually how he thinks. Um, so let me put a finer point on this. One of them brought up Aragorn from Lord of the Rings at one point and said Aragorn cleaning. I just can't imagine Aragorn cleaning the dishes, or like it wouldn't be. We never see that in Lord of the Rings, and it's like, okay, fine. We don't. That's not the story. um, First of all, wasn't it Tolkien himself who said that Sam was the hero of the saga? That Aragorn was a great man, but the hero of Lord of the Rings trilogy was Samwise Gamgee, and he is the quintessential domesticated man who is seeking simply to to mow his lawn and uh, to drink his beer and to be with, I forget the lady hobbit's name, and just have a family. To have, I think I saw a quote once from Tolkien on the subject of Sam, or at least using his character as a springboard. It seemed to say that it is no small thing to, might have even been in the book, it's no small thing to want a normal life, or something like that, a humble life. That is to say, a domestic life. Well, how does one exercise power in a family as the father? Does one act as some sort of communist intellectual vanguard in Tsarist Russia, conspiring and um, trying to very underhandedly manipulate, or I mean, I guess in this cartoonish view of the world, to violently, or through like some kind of battle speech, get the people in your house to, I don't know, do what you want them to do? Is that how it works in other houses? It doesn't seem to work in mine. Um, it's I think it's, to bring up Lord of the Rings again. It's more accurate to say, and this was a learning curve for me, especially. I came into married life and a family life not having done as much of the spiritual preparation for it, but I'd like to think, having grown into it a bit, I've seen the contrast between a sense of starting out a Denethor, starting out standing behind the armies of men, and in this case of my wife and my son, and wanting to kind of lead by the lash to try to accomplish the ends of the family, whether they be good and um, able to be accomplished or not, just to accomplish it by sort of being the worst example of a, yeah, leading from behind. And that's, maybe that can work for a time, and there are times where there isn't a choice but to bark orders and to expect them to be followed. But overwhelmingly, especially in the domestic sphere, but I've also had to see this in my professional life, the most effective leaders lead from the front. I mean, that's what's so compelling. I mean, it's easy to visualize in the movies of Lord of the Rings, and that charge at the completely ruinous odds in front of the Black Gate where Aragorn says, for Frodo, we're going to do this. We don't even know if it's going to work, essentially. We're just going to do this. And he doesn't, tell everyone to go and charge into a suicide mission, essentially, to distract the Eye of Sauron away from Mount Doom. No, he charges at the enemy himself, with minimal armor, mind you, but just he embodied as their leader an embodied willingness to lead by example rather than by mandate. I really think this is what really has set apart the history of leadership, especially the more heroic sort of leadership in Western history, from Eastern despots that, in the story of Xerxes, commanding an army of 1 million slaves that, won at Thermopylae, but the story we remember is the story of Leonidas standing amongst the Greeks and the Spartans in the hot gates and leading by participation in the effort that needs to be accomplished collectively. So, this idea that, yes, there can be a tendency, especially since the complete feminization of our communication styles, since, what are we on now? The fifth wave of feminism? That men will put things in terms of a deep pride that I take on, some of the domestic duties because I'm, a member of this house. And I think what they're getting at, especially if they have this sense of tradition, I really think that it's this sense of leading from the front. It's not it's not as easily dismissed as this, I really think, kind of mean-spirited stream was suggesting. At one point, I think Mr. D, who it must be said is a homosexual, that to our knowledge he's never made any claim of having started a traditional family structure, so I'm only working with the information I have here, and if that is his mode of living, that's completely alien and foreign to the expectations, the lived realities, the subtle negotiations of role, especially when every bit of the toxic culture around us is allied against us as the forces of Mordor against the ongoing existence of the family unit as such. I think it should be said that, and again, based on the information I have, because he did say, you shouldn't make assumptions about, my life, because there were mean-spirited comments on that subject from the chat, I recall, on the stream, but it doesn't change the fact that, I really can't take athletic advice for how, if I was to be on a football team, let's not make it about me. I don't think NFL players should take advice from a guy who has chosen to cut his spinal cord and become paralyzed from the waist down from puberty on, about how they should approach their training for NFL games. It's that's not something that you can just look at from the outside. You can have some perspective, I guess, but maybe I'm coming down hard on the guy, but you want to talk about 90s feminism bleeding into the minds of traditionalists. We're having a bunch of married men with families being lectured to by, as far as we know, a at least maybe no longer practicing, but fairly lifelong homosexual male. Like, that, what are we talking about? But to stop bad mouthing the guy, because he does make me laugh often. He was, I think, the one to say the idea that a man such as yourself, AA, he said that would be wasting his time styling a child's hair. Now, I can see where he's coming from, in some sense, that it's hard to argue that you are of the spiritual caliber of, say, Napoleon, if you're, like, so ensconced in the day-to-day styling of your daughter's hair, and you're so engrossed in this activity that it I guess in some way prevents you from being the great man of history. I don't know what the point he's making here is, because if we've learned anything in the modern world from the lack of fathers' influence over families, especially in certain communities that will remain unnamed while I'm still a fledgling channel, is that families, so-called, without fathers involved are profoundly impoverished. And that doesn't only come into play when the child increases in age, and especially in the teen years, when before they go out on their own, they're more explicitly negotiating with the world and with parental authority what their role is, what their ethics are, how they approach the world in a skillful and effective manner. You know, those are places where fathers, I think, shine. Not to say that mothers don't help, but that is, I think, where fatherhood really takes its stride. Totally agree. But the idea that father's impact is not from the beginning necessary is, again, ironically, considering the subject of this stream, to imbue, to totally be in lockstep with the tender years doctrine that came out of feminist efforts in domestic custody disputes in the family courts. That the idea that, like, women are the only parent necessary during the tender years of children, which I guess was kind of loosely defined, as I understand it, between, like, birth and 6 years or something. This is nonsense. I can see this already. My son's not even a year and a half. He's over a year. And I can see he processes things I say, and he processes play with me. He processes communicating with me differently than he does my spouse. It's almost like we're supposed to both be there. Now, I'm not saying that I should be quitting my job and spending all day essentially running a daycare for the people I'm, biologically related to. But there's something to be said for the fact that it is the notion of the great man we're promoting here in these right-wing spaces online, is it that men are, like, great men are, for lack of a better word, these kind of myopic autists that just kind of obsess over the nature of hierarchy and how the left is bastardizing Western civilization. I mean, all these things are true, and I think at this point pretty self-evident. They can be reiterated for, not feeling like we're crazy. But to accomplish great things, I really, and this is the thing I keep trying to get at. It's hard to articulate, but I'm gonna try. I guess. Well, how far in are we? We're like 20 minutes to get to the point. That sounds like me. The idea that the higher in a hierarchy one goes, that one gets to cast off the concerns, the daily preoccupations, the daily activities in to some degree. You get to throw all that away because now you're a boss. Is such a corporate mentality about the nature of leadership. No, you don't work in the mailroom anymore, Bill. You've been promoted to district regional manager. You don't do the sales day to day. But that I really think that is to completely reject what has been handed down to us in the West, in Christendom, for the nature of authority, of rightly and justly held authority that is worthy of respect. That Aragorn, for example, to go back to the Lord of the Rings, he still has a family. Like the fact that he defeated the armies of Mordor and reestablished the line of kings and united the kingdoms of Gondor and Rohan and made friendship with the elves and the dwarves and saved the hobbits and everything. The fact that he was able to accomplish these things through the spiritual charisma of his person, as well as the rights of his heritage as a descendant of the kings, doesn't mean that he doesn't have. It's like to think that means that his experience will only like tangentially touch the experience of the everyday people that don't have that authority, is to completely misunderstand hierarchy. Like I can't help but be frustrated by that whole stream, because it's like, I don't have to care about my kid. I don't have to do the dishes because I'm a member of the elite. I mean, do you have a fleet of servants? Maybe you have that luxury. I mean, in an age ruled by the merchant class, it's really about money. I mean, I guess unless you're, a member of the priesthood and you're unmarried in that case anyway, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But yeah, that was my principal issue here, to try to tie this up. That rising through the ranks of authority, if we could think of it in terms of like moving up the Aristotelian hierarchy of being, from mineral to vegetable to animal to man to, from the demos to the warrior caste to the priestly caste to the ruling caste. Any time you're moving up in terms of spiritual sophistication, it's not like you lose. Like, vegetables still have physical corporeality, like the minerals do, but there's an added layer of sophistication. It's not like animals don't have complex biochemical, digestive, and energy producing processes. They're actually just more sophisticated. They have that and more. Sorry to veer into metaphysics when I'm just trying to argue with some people about the fact that I'm not a bitch for doing the dishes, but I'm looking at my notes. I don't know what I was thinking in terms of this being able to to produce a coherent structure. I hope somebody is still listening to what I'm saying. I mean, even if not, I've enjoyed exploring the ideas here. Let me try to find anything else in these notes that I thought was worthy of note. Yeah, there was on the woman question, the accusation that, well, the fact that men have to do these things that are typically confined to the domestic spheres is evidence of the tyranny of women, which totally agree. I mean, Mr. D's unflinching description of we live in a gynocracy in the modern world. Duh. Yeah. Go outside. If this is confusing, look again. But that being said, I mean, it's hard to parse this question as I think about it more and more, because A, I'm trying to save my own sense of masculinity, and B, I think the assumption that like no domestic duties were done by men before the modern era, I think is really anachronistic. I think it's based in kind of looking at the 50s and 60s era of modernity, where the washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, the I'm trying to think of another big invention, but like those are the big ones that like really liberated women from a lot of what took up their time, going down to the river and washing the clothing and the sheets and everything, and how cooking has been outsourced to more restaurants than there are farms or grocers. Not to mention the birth control pill and its transhumanist effect on us, but I'm just trying to get at the fact that I don't think that the fact that married men with families, part of their exercise of their power in their homes is in some sense a negotiation with the inflated egos and high expectations, in terms of not only is he supposed to be, the man of her dreams, but he's also got to take on what not too long ago were considered, woman's work. I think there can still be an argument made that there is a masculine spirit there, that there is a orienting of the family, a leading from the front. Whether that is appreciated by women is another question. I don't think that comes naturally to them. I think it takes real spiritual progress, in my experience, for women to not take the efforts of men for granted. I mean, I could try to come up with reasons why I've concluded that over the years, but I'm starting to ramble at this point, everyone. Thanks for listening, if you still are. Keep listening to AA and Mr. D. I find them entertaining. I find them intriguing. I think they are a net positive force for good in the ongoing spreading of anything resembling sanity in the modern world. I just think they were really off base the other day, and it prompted me to grab a mic and to try to make them look stupid as a result of it. Yeah, I'm Mary MacArthur.